everybody, welcome back to a new series I'm putting together called Composing 101. I receive a lot of questions in regards to how I go about composing the music that I make for my albums, and sometimes even just for the demo videos I do, since I've been doing a lot more original music as of late. Mostly though for my album productions. The demos I do are usually short and not really too much in the way of having to think through an arrangement or a lot of compositional tools. It's more just to showcase a tone. But when I do albums, and for those of you who don't know, I have 7 albums out, dating all the way back to 2005. And a little side note, they are all now back up on Spotify. If anybody wants to just search up my name, you can listen to all my albums if you have a Spotify account. So go give those a listen and hopefully enjoy it. But you know, to compose music is an interesting thing. It's not as simple as just coming up with a riff and then going, okay, put some drums to it and everything's good. There's a lot more behind the scenes to make a production that is going to be engaging to the listener and makes them want to keep listening, and hopefully something that can get stuck in their head that they're going to want to come back to listen to again. So there's some things I've learned over the years, through all the years that I've been composing, and I really started when I was in my teens, probably 14, 15 is when I really took an interest in starting to write music. And there's a lot of things I have learned from listening to other folks' music and just trial and error and experimenting. And through this series, I wanted to take a step-by-step look at exactly what I do. And I've chosen a particular song. I could have chosen a whole bunch of different songs, I guess, but I want to take you from front to end through one song from a production of mine from, I believe it was 2012, and that's an album called Broken. The song I'm going to use is called Useful Idiots. On this particular song, I had the great pleasure of working with my friend Kenny Aronoff on drums. Kenny's played with just about anybody you can name in the world, probably most well-renowned for playing with John Mellencamp. He's played with Smashing Pumpkins. He's played, you name it, their list goes on and on. He's one of the top session musicians in the world. And I had my good friend Martin Motnick, who now plays bass for the band Accept. And he's played with Uli John Roth and a host of others as well. So a fabulous rhythm section on this. And I recently did a video of a playthrough of this song if you want to hear the finished product, or you can go listen to it on Spotify. But I want to take this as a multi-part series where I break down my thought process of how this song started all the way to the completion of it, and hopefully there'll be some tips and tricks in there that will help others out there who are looking to compose their own music, or maybe find that they can compose but get stuck along the way, and maybe just some tips to add different ideas to your existing composition. So without further ado, let's get started. You might wonder what I was playing there. Well, that is the riff that started it all for the song Useful Idiots. That's how I came up with this entire song, with that riff right there. Now you might say, how did you come up with that? And that today is what this episode is going to be about. Sort of the idea, and then the idea of theme and variation, which we're going to discuss in this episode on a smaller scale, and expand on the idea of theme and variation throughout the composition on a larger scale in future episodes, okay? And I hope that made sense, but stick with me on this. So a lot of people will ask me first and foremost, how do you come up with that initial spark, that initial idea? Now that's a loaded question, because it could be a million different ways. It could be sitting around just noodling, trying a new chord, right? Trying some, finger pattern that you haven't tried before. That's all fine and dandy, but that doesn't really give us a way to sort of say, well, I have writer's block right now. Let's say nothing's just stumbling off of my fingers. What do I do? It's nice to have a more systematic approach to kind of fall back onto if all else fails. And I think that's where a good rooting in music theory can really help folks to spark new ideas, okay? And I have a lot of videos on my channel, probably not the most popular videos on my channel. The tone stuff seems to be more, but they really talk about a lot of the important theory that I use. I have some stuff about intervals and chords, and please go check that out, and I'll try to remember to link that in the description below, because there's a lot of helpful information in there that if you know it, it can spark interesting new ideas. So with this, I remember this song in particular, I was kind of feeling like, I don't know what to do with it, to come up with a new idea. So I gave myself sort of a set of music theory parameters to follow. And for some reason at the time I was thinking, I'm going to write something in A Dorian, okay? So A Dorian just kind of being... But I mean, again, you know, Dorian's been done a million times, as has pretty much everything else, right? Every other musical tool also has been sort of done to death, right? So I thought, I'm going to throw something else in there to add something interesting to the mix. And I thought I would combine kind of the blues scale in there as well. All right, if anybody's wondering, I'm using my Archon Ultimate preset from the Line 6 Marketplace, and this is just one of the overdrive snapshots from that. So when we combine the two different things that I talked about, the A blues scale with the A Dorian scale, it's good to be able to analyze and know what the different things in there that are really going to make the Dorian and the blues stand out. Now with the blues, it's that flatted fifth added to our pentatonic scale. Now that stuff's been overdone as well, but it's interesting when we add in the note F sharp is the other real defining note that's going to stand out. And if we kind of focus on those notes, the E flat and the F sharp, with the F sharp being more of the Dorian note and the E flat being the blues note, which the E flat also kind of can sort of imply Lydian, but I'm not using a major third in here, so it doesn't really totally do that. And I also have the minor seventh and whatnot. So it gets a little more complex than just saying it's more blues scale sound. So what I started noodling around with was the idea of sort of focusing on those tones around our sort of center tone A, as it were, right? So I came up with, you know, just thinking pentatonic scale, but adding those in as color tones. So I started off with a riff like this, and this is what I just kind of came up with that I thought, well, this is going to be really lame if I just leave it as such, but it was this. Now, if I ever wrote something like that and just left it alone, people would think, oh, yay, you know, big deal, right? So what I did is I thought, okay, I can keep this kind of groove going, this syncopated thing, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, okay, not hitting on the 2 and the 4, which is actually where, you know, a lot of times the snare drum might hit or there's an accented beat. I'm playing it more syncopated. So the first way I added some interest to these simple notes is through rhythmic variations and maybe rhythms that were less expected, which is usually how syncopation feels, right? We're maybe expecting to hear a note on 2 and on 4, but I'm going to take it away. Okay, so I started off with that. Now, one thing I love doing is playing around with time signatures. And one way I find is if we are playing a riff that is fairly simple note-wise and rhythm-wise, if we just play with time and mess around with the time signatures a bit, we can make it a little more interesting and engage the listener a little more, even though what they're hearing note-wise isn't super complex. So I decided to extend this first part of this riff into 5/4 time. So what I ended up with in the end was this. There you see the blues note. But I did follow that blues note up, preceded or follow it up with the note D. or go right through to the E note either. So a lot of times when we hear the blues scale played, it's usually the E flat is oftentimes surrounded by the D or the E. In some sort of way. And I thought, I'm going to really focus my attention on that E flat and not do the neighboring notes at all. Okay, so that was the beginning of my riff, and I thought, okay, this is kind of cool. This has some potential. What I thought now is I'm going to keep that theme going, and this is what I was talking about theme and variation. You might say, well, what is theme and variation? Theme and variation means we come up with an idea, and then we don't totally trash it and go on to something else. Rather, we take that theme and we add variety to it. Just enough to make it different, but not so different, let's say, that the original isn't recognizable, if that makes sense. And again, everything I'm saying here has to be taken with a grain of salt because I am not the keeper of what is right and wrong as far as composition goes. Very thankful for that. Everybody has their own artistic flair and creativity that they're going to bring to an idea, and that's the beauty of music. We all come up with different things. I'm just throwing some ideas out in the way that I think that hopefully can help some folks. So theme and variation is very, very important, I find, because if we never have anything in a composition that anybody can kind of, dig their toes into and hang on, you can lose your listener quickly, right? If it's just so all over the place and they never hear anything even vaguely familiar, they're gonna have a very hard time staying engaged. So this way, if you have that theme but add enough variation, it can keep the listener engaged and they'll want to hear more and they'll want to keep listening. So what I thought is, okay, I'm gonna start off with that first measure of 5/4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and, right? Now I'm going to start that theme again. But I'm going to tack on one more beat in this measure and make it into a 6/4 measure. And I'm going to add, obviously, 2 extra notes now to my feel. So I'm going to go to the G and the F sharp. Now I'm introducing that Dorian note in that I wanted to have sort of mixed in with the blues scale. Okay, so the second measure then is, so those 2 measures together. Okay, so that's coming together now. I have something to sort of dig my teeth into now and work with. All right, let's stick with our theme. And I said, well, let's just keep that measure of 5/4 exactly the same as the first one. So I end up with one measure. So now we've got 3 measures. First measure and third measure are the same. Second measure was the beginning of some variation of that theme. Now on the fourth measure, and I oftentimes think in groups of 4 or groups of 8, right? So that fourth measure, what I want to do is I want to maybe have a similar theme to my second measure, but again with some variation. So here's what I started off with. I came up with sort of the first half of the measure being the same, but then I thought I'm going to change this up now completely at the end, utilizing maybe that F sharp and that E flat note, and getting both that Dorian and blues scale kind of together. And the thing about those 2 notes is, there's my A tonal center, my E flat, and my F sharp. Kind of gives a bit of dissonance when it's all played together somewhat. So the last part of this measure, I did a big stretch from my low F sharp here up to my E flat, and I played. And I finally kind of resolved it back to that D note, which was a note that we kind of feel like maybe we were missing with the rest of the riff. So the entire 4 bars, here's the first bar. Okay, second bar with variation, 1 extra beat, and that F sharp note. Third bar, same as the first. And then the final bar with the variation again. All together. All right. Great. Nice, short, compact. I thought that's short enough and interesting enough that I can probably recycle this yet again. but I want to maybe add a little bit more variation. You sort of see how I'm building this out. I'm taking a very simple idea. I've made it interesting, first of all, by choosing interesting notes from my music theory knowledge. I've then said, okay, let's maybe play with some time signatures, make it a little bit syncopated. You see all these musical tools that if you understand them and you have them in your toolbox, you can kind of draw from them and hopefully create something interesting. Now there's some folks that might listen to this riff and hate it. That's fine, we all have different tastes, right? I kind of liked it, and I kind of think it came together nicely once I put it together with the rest of the band, which we'll talk about shortly. So the second time through this, this sort of 4-measure sequence, what I did is I did the first measure exactly the same again. The second measure, I added a little bit more variation again. Here's what I did with that. I started the first half off the same, then I did a full beat of rest instead of just an 8th note, half a beat of rest, okay? So that measure sounded like this. So instead of the variation of this the first time, I have, so that measure is, okay? And you can see up on the screen as I have this up as I play it, the tab of what I'm doing, right? So that would be the measure 10 on the screen, right? So far then, that second half of playing through this 4-measure cycle, we have this. All right? For the next measure, I simply go back to the same theme I started with, the first measure of the riff. And then for the fourth one, I go back to the same idea where I stretched out from the F sharp and the E flat, resolving it back to that D note. And I changed that up at the end. And I used quarter note triplets with a different note altogether where I go to this low E, leading into another chord that I want. That last measure sounds like this. So now I have a really nice 8-note groove with theme and variation that kind of weave all together and I think make a nice 8-bar section. Now, the thing about that is, I've just written way more of the tune than I even know at this point, because I can utilize this for many other purposes through the song with even more variation, kind of keeping the listener engaged with what they're familiar with, but expanding it out by adding different tools and techniques, as we'll see as we go through this in the future episodes. So here's the full 8 measures, and you can follow along. Here it's going to be starting at measure 5 here, okay? And that's the riff that started it all. All right, so then I have one more thing before I sort of close out this, what I'm thinking to be as my intro section that's going to introduce this tune to everybody. And I wanted something really different, something a little more driving and let the rhythm section take over. So I thought I'm going to pick a couple nice chords here and just sort of let them ring out. And what I settled on was this E minor 9th chord, okay? So if you notice, I finished the previous riff off with this E note, which sets up that tonality. And then I go up here, where if you look at this, I'm not playing the E on this string, but we have a minor 3rd here. We have a minor 7th, and then we have a 9th interval. And I take that same chord shape and I run it right up to an A minor 9th chord. And the bass guitar supports that, as I'll show you in the rhythm section. So what we have is this. And then I end it with something that I love to do. Something unexpected, something different than what we've heard. I'm a big fan of dissonance, notes that tend to sound like they clash together. And on the guitar with distortion and some palm muting, you can get away with some really cool things. And all I do here is I grab the E flat note from the blues scale and I put it against an E note. Okay, so that whole section is... before I head into my next section of the song. So in total, here's what we have. And that's my part. So a lot of times what I do is when I compose is I actually have my Guitar Pro software open. And as I come up with these ideas, I notate it. I don't want to forget it. Some people will just, record it into their DAW, which is fine too. And I do that sometimes just for a quick thing. But I like to come back, and it saves me so much time in so many situations over the years where when I want to come back and relearn the song. And maybe sometimes years later, we're talking like, I probably wrote this 9 years ago. I don't remember what I did 9 years ago if I haven't looked at this in X number of years. So I can just flip open my Guitar Pro file and I can take a quick look and go, oh yeah, that's what I was playing, and I've got it instantly. So I love to do these charts and these scores, and also allows me to be able to use it for teaching material like this as well. So you might say, okay, well now what? We've got this riff. Great. Now what do we do with it? Well, I'm all about having that great starting point. So what I'll do at this point usually is I'll say, I'm not going to keep trying to write the rest of the song. I want to flesh this out a bit. I want to get a rhythm section to this. I want to start making this really musical now and seeing how we can have the other instruments interplay with it. And that'll oftentimes give me a better idea of exactly where to go next. Whether I continue with this part with some more variation or whether I come up with something brand new. Is this going to end up just being an intro, or will it also be a chorus? Or will it be a verse? Or will it be a different section altogether? A bridge maybe, or whatnot, right? So I like to flesh it out. So let's do that right now. We'll go over to Cubase. So here we are over in my project file in Cubase. And you'll notice there's a lot going on in this. I only have it isolated to a single little spot here, but this is a finished project. Like I mentioned, we got the amazing drumming of Kenny Aronoff and the amazing bass playing of my good friend Martin Motnick on this. And here's all my drum tracks, and he did a bang up job playing on that. And here's Martin's bass track, and the rhythm guitar just doubled. Now on this particular project, this is from the playthrough video I just did recently. So I'm using my Dual Plexi Ultimate Line 6 Marketplace tones on this one. What you were hearing previous in this video is my Archon Ultimate. Both work really nicely with it. I really like both those presets. And that's the thing with all my Marketplace presets, I use these myself. And I don't process them in the mix at all. I could if I wanted to, if they didn't suit a certain thing, but they just work really well. And that's the thing with all of those. I really work on those to make sure they're going to work in a production as is, so they're going to require hopefully very little tweaking from the end user, right? So here's what we have. And if we just meep this out, here's my riff that I had just finished playing you. All right, and that's just looping. Okay, so that's it. That's what we heard before. We know we have that. We saw the tab for that. Now, what do you do as far as drums and bass and whatnot? Well, a lot of times I'll write a song that maybe the guitar part is more sparse than that and it requires its own particular bass line. In this particular case, I composed a bass line for it that was just basically doubling the guitar part. I really wanted that to have a big, heavy sound. And that's one thing. If you want your guitar riff to sound big, fat, and heavy, a lot of times just doubling it with the bass is going to provide that. It's going to add that bottom end and that power to a riff. And that's what I wanted in this case. Doesn't mean that's going to stay that way for the rest of the song, or maybe it does. It just depends on what I need at that time. So I basically asked my friend Martin to play me this. And that's a question I get a lot. When you send it to a session musician, are they just playing whatever they want, or do they play what you gave them? I'm a big stickler about giving a very detailed demo, because when I'm composing, I really want the drums and the bass to be kind of what was composed. Now, having said that, I'll never tie the hands of and musician. I've worked with some amazing musicians: Tony Levin, Marco Miniman, Kenny Aronoff, Brian Beller, Greg and Matt Bissonette, Chad Wackerman, you know, Jerry Marotta, you name it. There's tons of amazing world-class musicians I've worked with, and I'd be really silly to ask these people to play on my album and then say, well, no, don't actually be creative at all. So what I try to do is give them the basic parts I want and then let them add their musical brilliance to it, which is what they do. And sometimes it's as simple as just replaying what I gave them. But usually in the case of drummers, they have a little more freedom to add some fills in and some flair of their own, which is what always happens. And Kenny's a master at that. Marco Miniman's a master at that. So here's what I got back from Martin, which was basically just a strict doubling of our guitar riff. Okay, some nice little slides and whatnot in there, and that works great. With the guitar part, you can hear it just really doubles it up nice. And so on and so forth. Now, as far as the drums go, here's the thing now. When I was composing this drum part, what I really wanted was something that was going to accentuate the things that I had kind of baked into this rhythmically. Now, the thing I had mentioned to you before is I had left out beat 2, beat 4, beat 2, beat 4, beat 2, beat 4, pretty much across the board. Over here a little different. I wanted the drums to really kind of further accentuate that. So what we'll hear in the drum part is the snare drum oftentimes, I think most of the time in most of these bars, it ends up hitting not on the 2 or the 4, but on the and of beat 2 and the and of beat 4, and that kind of locks it together with it. I'll play just the drums and the guitar part. Okay, and we'll leave that part for a second. So if you notice, what's really driving the rhythm is those steady quarter notes on the hi-hat, and I'll put the click on here. And that's what I wanted, that driving kind of hi-hat that just keeps pounding through and allows the kick and the snare to kind of work around that. So we have one element that's driving the rhythm straight ahead, quarter notes, nothing simpler, right? And then we have the kick and the snare kind of working with the guitar part. You notice the kick drum ends up kind of hitting on 1 and, snare on the and of beat 2, kick on 3 and, snare on 4, right? And then something maybe a little different here. And that's how that all locks together. You can really hear that. You hear there, Kenny's beautiful in that da 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 da. He does a beautiful snare fill that locks in with what the guitar riff is doing. Again, accentuating that stomp, that hit, that extra rest I was telling you about before. And again, on the toms, and he just accentuates that quarter note triplet feel. Now, from there, the next part with just the A minor ninth and A minor ninth chords, where I'm just kind of sustaining the chords. I wanted to stay out of the way there and let the drums just kind of drive this through, keeping it just straight in 6/4. So there isn't that time change, and the drums now aren't going to be so syncopated. So we went from a very syncopated feel where all those snare drums were on upbeats, and now we're going to be in a case where all those snare drums are going to be on downbeat, and that was done very deliberately to again, I've used one musical tool, lots of syncopation. Now I want to give the listener less syncopation, and that's what this sounds like here. And then that build with the guitar, right? So for the most part, much less syncopation going on there. Kick on 1, snare on 4. Kick on 1, snare on 4. Now there, Kenny, brilliant, does a little bit of a different thing. He moves it to the 3. So really interesting, and those are the little things that keep it interesting, and that could be something Kenny did because he's brilliant that way in knowing how to keep things interesting as well. So we have a kick on 1, snare on 4, kick on 1, snare on 4, kick on 1, snare on 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And Kenny's snare sound is always amazing. So that's how I ended up with that. And if we put that all together with bass, drums, and guitar, here's what we have. And that's it. That's what got me going on this song. Now this song ends up clocking out somewhere around, let me see here, sorry. You know, a little over 4 minutes, and yeah, it's 4 minutes and 10 seconds roughly, give or take. A little over 4 minutes. So this whole section here basically clocks in and around 25 to, yeah, say 25 seconds or so, okay? So I've got a really good chunk of parts that I can reuse with more theme and variation later. So next episode, we're gonna look at how I take that part and expand it and get more mileage out of it while almost fooling the listener into thinking they're hearing something else, or maybe not hearing something else, but fooling them to thinking they're not just hearing something very similar to what they've already heard. And that's where we're gonna start writing melodies and using more theme and variation. Theme and variation is going to be a key thing throughout all of this. So I hope you enjoyed that first part. I want to break this up into different parts because otherwise it would get very long and in-depth and probably kind of boring. So if you guys want to digest that much of it, and then next time I will come back and we'll go on to part 2, and hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Please check out my music on Spotify. It's all up there now. Just search my name. It'll all come up. I believe there's all 7 albums on there now. Which was nice to get back done again. It was up there a while back and it was taken down, and it's now back up, thankfully. The other thing I have going, if you do enjoy my music, is I've got a pre-order going for vinyl, a very limited edition vinyl pressing of my last album, Brief Eclipse, which features Marco Miniman, Tony Levin, and my really good friend Jason Henry. That, I'm going to have the link below as well. That's done through the Diggers Factory. There's about 25 days left on that, and I need to sell some more albums to make sure that happens. So if you want to support me in that way, that would be wonderful. Really, really appreciate it. And you can also buy the downloads for my album right from my website, which is also linked below. So I really appreciate the support, guys, and I hope you enjoyed that. And I'll be back soon. This is a series I'm really excited about. It's something I've wanted to do for a while because I've had lots of questions like this, and hopefully I can answer some of those, and we can have some fun with this and enjoy it together. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Really appreciate it. I will be back very soon with some more content. Please like the video, share it if you don't mind, and subscribe to the channel and hit the bell notification to get notified when I do new content. And I'll be back very soon. Thanks again, guys. Ciao for now.